business partnerships team at the Independent Electricity System Operator in Ontario. Previously, Katie was Director of Environmental Sustainability Solutions at Atrium Health in Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the largest public not-for-profit hospital systems in the U.S. She also served as a sustainability leader at UHN in Toronto for almost a decade. Katie practices system science to transform organizational culture, making pro-environmental behaviors easy in large, complex work settings. Through participatory and collaborative techniques, Katie creates conditions for staff and executive engagement, positive disruption, and simple solutions to emerge and persist for the long term. Protecting environmental and human health, as well as conservation of natural and economic resources, are the outcomes of her program. She is currently focused on a framework that embraces the complexity of behavior, learning, and social decision-making to complement traditional energy management practice for commercial and institutional organizations. Thank you, Kate, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, next slide, please, Stephen. So I'm so pleased to be here today to talk to you about some of the work that I've been doing in healthcare with respect to energy management, with a focus on social behavior and organizational learning, and how these two elements can come together to complement the traditional energy management that we have in place to reduce and minimize building scale complications and reduce energy waste at the same time. There's all sorts of multiple benefits from doing this sort of thing. This is not easy work. Most people working in energy management, and probably many on this call today, don't have much exposure or training in the social or natural sciences. And it may even be a leap to understand how these things can help with our energy objectives. But there is evidence and there is practice that we can draw on that help us to start designing humans, people, into our energy management systems. So for me personally, my background is in environmental science, but I've drawn on anthropology, psychology, behavioral economics, complexity, biology, semiotics, law to get some of these programs off the ground. So a little bit of everything is required in these efforts. So it is really important to take all those pieces and connect the dots. And what I hope to share with you today is a little bit about the story that I have woven together to get some really amazing outcomes. Next slide, please. So why focus on the behavior or the people to save energy? I mean, the obvious answer here is people are not going away. We have to deal with the people, whether we like them or not. They're around. And when we're talking about behavior, what we understand to be behavior is actually a response or an individual response to our environment. So the context in which people are making their energy saving decisions every day actually becomes the most important factor. It's not the behavior itself. For me, behavior often is the measure of success. Was our program able to achieve our goal? And we can track it through the changes that we see around individual behaviors. But the intervention and the changes actually come within the environment. So this is a starting point for us. And we've seen over the last 20 years that energy management is laser focused on technology. We have done everything that we possibly can to make sure that we're saving as much energy as we can with innovative and new efficient technologies and how we implement them. We've done a little bit on process change, and we've done very, very little when it comes to the people. But we have to realize that without acknowledging the people in this equation, we're leaving savings on the table. We're not even considering some of the savings that were there for the taking. And and the worst part about it is if we've already paid for these savings and we're not acquiring them, that is a real thorn. That is a real challenge. And so now we have to tap into these people. And so no matter how forgetful, irrational, difficult, quirky, pesky, or wonderful the people are that we live and work with, they are not going away. And the sooner that we are able to integrate them into our program design and planning, the more savings we have available to us. So next slide, please. So this is a snapshot from Atrium Health. It was previously called Carolina's Healthcare System, and based in Charlotte, North Carolina, but spanning across 4 states, 40 hospitals, 900 care locations. This is a massive institution, 62,000 staff. The case study that I'm going to talk to you about today, you can find a write-up about it on the Tools of Change website, and there's a link in the deck here, so you can dig that up. You can Google it or either dig it up and read a little bit more of the details. So I just wanted you to be aware of the context in which we were working. And then, so here's a story for you. Have you had a moment in your energy decision making where you've experienced a decision being made in one area of the organization, let's just say finance, and having the impact show up elsewhere? I bet you if I could see your faces, which I really wish I could, and we could be together and have that interaction, I bet you would be nodding. Because I think if you've worked in this space long enough, you've definitely experienced decisions happening in one part of the organization and the outcomes being dealt with elsewhere. So here's an example. We were in a situation where a piece of equipment was, we needed to replace it, and the finance team was in charge of making that decision. Two business cases were presented, one for the equipment that had a manual control for water bypass, and one that had automatic controls for the water bypass. The difference in cost for the automatic was $15,000. Finance, of course, and in much of the traditional energy management decision-making that we've had to date, we look at first cost only. What is it to get that equipment in place? So that was the decision that was made. The $15,000 less expensive equipment was purchased and installed with manual controls. The first hot day of the season, the maintenance individual was asked to go and open the water bypass to maintain the temperatures that were required. No problem. Dropped what he was doing, went and did this action, had no training on the equipment, didn't even know what it was all about. He was told to move a valve, he went and moved it, and that was that. One day later, the water bypass was still open and draining into the creek behind the hospital. 2 days later, the water bypass was still open. 3 days later, a week, a month later, 6 months later, with an astronomically high water bill, the energy manager noticed that something was going on with this equipment. That water valve had never been closed once it was opened, and $50,000 in water went down into the creek. So this is a prime example of how the decision-making that we take to get our energy efficiency happening needs to consider the people that are going to be executing those actions. That mechanic had no idea what that valve was for, what he was doing with that valve. He was simply following an instruction to move it. Did anybody ever stop to consider whether he had the training or the time in his day to go back and fix it? No. So this is just one illustration of how we need to integrate people together. So thanks for advancing the slide, Stephen. The program that we came up with in Charlotte was called Energy Connect. The focus of our program was to help link human actions to energy savings, natural resource conservation, and the holy grail of all energy work and all sustainability work within healthcare is to improve the patient experience. Very hard metric to measure, but very aspirational to think about. So we did that with our Energy Connect program, and that's the beautiful logo that we came up. JJ is familiar with this program, and Ed is familiar with this program. as advisors. So both those guys had the opportunity to see us down in Charlotte. Next slide, please. So what did we do? We did something different. What we did was we collected stories to help learn about our energy culture. So we collected stories from the different stakeholders within our energy ecosystem, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that on a separate slide. But what I want to introduce is this idea of collecting stories. It's very simple to do. We can all do it. Children can tell stories. Actually, as adults, we lose that a little bit, but we have it in us. We can do this. And we collected our stories, and we started to see the dynamics of what energy looked like amongst the people that had to interact with the energy systems within the hospital. So these are a few clips from the stories that we collected. The first one, I'm going to read you the whole story because it's quite an incredible example. This was from the building engineer. He had never written a story as an adult in his entire life. We invited him to tell us his energy story, and this is what he said to us. Once upon a time, there was a pediatric building that was always cold during the winter months. Every day, the pediatric nurse would set the thermostat to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and over all this time, the suite temperature never increased and always stayed freezing. But one day, the engineer took a look at the discharge air temperature from the vents and found that the temperature was very cold, even though the thermostat was set high. He then checked the attic and found that the outside air dampers were left open. He fixed the dampers to operate properly and closed them to the minimum level. Because of that, the building site began to warm up and make all these nurses and children happy, until finally the engineer and his team now check the dampers every day during the winter, and ever since then, everyone is warm and happy. And here's the best part of the story: thankful to the smart engineer. So this was a sense of pride that this engineer was able to solve this problem, the conditions of the building for these people, and he was able to feel that as a sense of pride in his work, and of course executed at solving at root cause. So this really helped us to understand what it was that we were working with, who it was we were working with, and how we would intervene in the system. So next slide, please. I'm actually going to start with the end. So we did do an IPMVP model, International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol, option C. So that's a pre and post measurement. If you're not familiar with those international standards, there's lots of resources available to help explain. But this is what we were able to do. So we launched our program in 2015. In 2018, we took these numbers off. These are hot off the press. And you can see from our program, which I'll spend the rest of my time telling you about, what we were able to accomplish. Now, you need to remember there was no capital investment at all in this program. It was staff time. It was my time, it was our advisors' time, and it was our mechanics and engineers' time. And you can see with it what they were able to accomplish. Now, granted, there was some low-hanging fruit at some of these sites, but some of them had been working on energy for quite some time. So I think one of the best numbers there, of course, is that 24.5% in gas savings for our emergency care facility. This was about these guys who ran that facility taking the advice that we were able to provide them through minimal contact, and using their own expertise, having the permission to make changes, and you can see what they were able to accomplish. I mean, even if you were to invest $20 million into energy efficiency, some of these numbers would actually be looking pretty good. And then to think that we did it without an investment of any capital dollars, I mean, it starts to actually put some of our large capital investments into question. Why would we do it that way first? Why would we not work with our people? So anyway, I just wanted you to have the numbers in the back of your mind as we go through the story. So next slide, please. So we launched our award-winning Energy Connect program. The quote that I go to bed thinking about and that I wake up in the morning thinking about is "Ignore the people at your peril." And this comes from Dr. Reuben Sussman. He's the director of the Behavior and Human Dimensions program at the American Council for the Energy Efficiency Economy, full-time, looking at why people do the things they do to save energy. And he is an environmental psychologist and is a very, very brilliant individual. And I loved when he said this to me. So we did two main things. We found a target audience and we found a target behavior. We wanted to work with facility staff and we wanted to reduce the overrides in the BAS. What you'll take away from this, I hope, is that it was very specific. Your programs, because they're going to be dynamic and probably you're not going to have that much experience doing them, you want to be as specific as you possibly can. And so that's what we did. Next slide, please. The way that we were able to get this off the ground was in what I'm going to call three distinct buckets. The first bucket was this idea of participatory research. This is where you're going to have to dial up your connection to the social sciences, where you're going to have to start to think about how can we obtain this information. So surveys, focus groups, interviews, workshops, and we even ran 2 international summits with all volunteers who were just interested in the work we were doing and wanted to participate in helping to think this through. Participatory research is very, very beneficial in this line of work because we don't have the answers. We're not going in to test something that we've already decided is going to work in one way or the other. What we need to do is understand the context in which we're working and then design and test as we go. So the participatory mode was essential. And to be 100% honest, this hospital, and I would put my money on almost any hospital, has not done participatory research with their facilities teams. We have not had our mechanics in the room to tell us what it is about the energy systems that they work with, and what the changes might, how the changes might impact them. I don't think that has been done anywhere else, but we did do that, and it is easy, and it is doable, and it is successful. We started our program with training. We did have a Department of Energy grant to launch what is called the Building Retuning Training. It's sort of a BOC light, but even that training was a little too much for our workforce. We needed to revise it. And we did. So we worked with some building scientists through the grant to revise the training to come up with what we called the Energy Connect program. We had a design team which was comprised of both people that were decision makers, as well as people that were implementing those decisions, as well as our evaluation team and other hospital departments that would have some influence on those decisions. So construction, even our HR and public affairs type departments were involved to a certain extent. And so we could decide which test locations we wanted to do, how to get our interventions into the field, what kind of baseline was going to be credible to our users. And then, of course, I am a huge stickler for evaluation and proof. You can't just say you did it and that it worked. We have to have something that we can lean on and go back to, and that is verifiable. And that all takes effort, expertise, and time. So we had that team together to do that. Next slide, please. This is really the landscape that I've been talking about, the actors in the energy ecosystem, the number of people that are really involved when it comes down to it, who is involved in energy savings. And this is just some of the people. And what this did for our program, what this did for Energy Connect and for our participants and our design team, was to really see how many people are involved and really start to get to the nuts and bolts of it, which is how they interact. What are the relationships between these elements that can either dial up success or dial it back down for us? That was a very, very important learning from the whole process, was to see how many connections that we needed to actually make our decisions appropriate. And by appropriate, I mean durable. So next slide, please. You're all very curious what we did. So we started with 6 interventions for building mechanics. We did in-person training, and you can see this was 10 hours over 5 weeks. We met with them once a week for 2 hours. This was the entire facility department of each of our test locations. So we had 6 test locations and 6 interventions. The interventions that we designed are listed here. The case study goes into a lot more detail about what each of them are and how they evolved with time. But at a high level, we wanted to make data visible to our mechanics. We wanted to have site-based energy champions, people that our mechanics could go to with any question about energy quickly. They also had the energy managers at the corporate level, and then external resources as well. That was all well and good, but if they didn't have somebody on site that they could go to, made it much harder to progress. We developed a process flow for hot and cold call response. So a lot of the mechanics, especially the ones that would be on overnight, didn't necessarily have the same training or understanding of the building systems as the day crew. And they often found some irregularities. So this was a way to try to neutralize that and make sure that everybody was responding in the same way. Remember, we're trying to reduce overrides in the BAS. That was our target behavior, right? Because everybody's just putting in whatever to make, just make the complaints go away, stop the calls, make everybody comfortable, make everybody safe. Mission number 1. But how do we do that in the most energy efficient way? So the 5th intervention, which was the creme de la creme, the pièce de résistance of the entire program, was documenting those adjustments in the BAS. Anybody could go and do it on their own time, but if there was no way to know that that had been done, it could be lost in the system. I take you back to the valve story the water valve story that I told you at the beginning. Nobody knew what was going on with that system. There was no communication channel between anybody to know when it had happened, why it had happened, and what needed to happen next. So these types of processes to start documenting what each individual was doing started to elevate the data that we needed to be able to act on. And the final intervention, which was actually the hardest, was to promote conversations between the occupants, which in this case was clinical staff. We weren't necessarily talking to patients, and facilities about energy savings. And this really helped to twist the story around. So those calls and those complaints weren't seen as, why are they bothering me again? To, oh, that's data. If they're not comfortable with this situation, there's something that I might be able to fix at the back end that will help to reduce this problem or eliminate this problem at root cause. So that became a very important element. The interventions are as deep and wide as your creativity. This is just what we came up with in the situation that we had. We could have gone in 50 million different directions, and you can too, because it's all going to be based on what is important to you and what you see as feasible. So interventions is the fun part of the whole thing. Next slide, please.
Katie?
Yes.
Yeah, we had the question on the chat line from Paul. He was just asking, he's wondering how many participants see the BAS systems being utilized as a remote control rather than an automatic control system. And what you're saying about the BAS system there, I guess it relates to that, right?
I didn't understand the question. Could you say it again?
He just wondered how many participants see the BAS systems being utilized as a remote control rather than an automatic control system.
Very few at the time in the hospitals when we did our pilot had access to the remote BAS. That came down to a little bit of the culture within the organization around the trust. But I know it's definitely feasible, and it's certainly something that they were looking at. But in the time that we ran the early days of this pilot, none in our pilot had remote access. Some of our larger facilities, some of their guys did have remote access. Is that the question you were asking?
Yeah, I think that just getting to the point where sometimes in the culture of the organization, we tend to get on the BAS and make these adjustments remotely without really getting into the BAS and making sure that it's doing its job and doing things automatically for us.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, there were a lot of moving parts, and we even had like a controls guy looking, specifically looking at faults and alarms and trying to tweak all of that remotely. An engineer, not necessarily one of the facilities individuals, mechanics on the ground. So there were issues around that as well. That was another communication pathway that we had to improve, which we did. I'm throwing this up there. It's a bit of the method to the madness. I'm a quite visual person, a visual learner, and if you are too, then maybe this will help. So you can kind of see what it's like to do a program like this. You start with casting a wide net. You open up to the possibilities. That's sort of the wide bit of this arrow bubble thing. And then as you cast your wide net, looking for possibilities, what it is that you need to know to get to your objective, you can start to identify targets and drill down. And so that you end up working on specific things for some time, resolving, and then moving on again to cast a wide net as you discover new things or different things, or even want to just continue in your energy saving journey. You open up your door again, and so it is kind of like there's no beginning and end. It's quite ongoing, but you're not doing everything at once. There's these moments of exploration, and then there's these moments of convergence where we're looking at specific things. And my model has always been to move from imprecise phases of hunch to proof by observation. I'm a practitioner at heart. I worked with Ed for the majority of my career at UHN, and we did this there. All of that amazing stuff that he talked about in the last presentation largely fell into this camp. We didn't necessarily have buckets of resources or buckets of people to help, but what we did have was a hunch. And what we could do was explore. And then what we could do is find some data, facts, observations, opinions, stories, and start to work with that into a target. And we end up closing our gap between our values and our actions, so that people can do the things that we want to do, that they want to do, and that we want them to do. So hopefully that's a bit helpful to any of the visual learners out there. And what it ends up asking us to do is value new ways of knowing, that there's different ways to acquire data and information, and it can all still be true. All right, so next slide. Taking it to the next level from there, what I started to look for were patterns. Because we're dealing with the messy space of people, because we're dealing with the messy space of energy management, and then layer on top of that the messy space of hospitals, we need to be clever in how we are extracting our truth. And the best way that I'd like to put forward for doing that is to observe patterns. And those patterns come from the practices and structures that are already in place. We're looking at what is already there so that we can find our pivot point to intervene in the system and change it towards the direction we want to go. So this is a little bit of the method as well. In addition to that other graph, this is a little bit more around the method of what to look for and how to look for it and why we would look for those things. This is not easy work. So I don't want anybody to think like, oh, this is, I'll just spend a Tuesday, a couple hours, and I'll figure it out. No, you really do need some level of dedication to your theory of change and to the system that you want to influence to be able to do this effectively. And I could talk about this piece forever. So if anybody wants to get into some of those weeds, do feel free to look me up and we can have that conversation. The next slide sort of summarizes the why of it all. We do this because some of the structures that we have in place do lead to the intended outcomes. They do result in things that we want more of: energy savings, smooth operations, learning, belonging. And then the thing I really want you to focus on here is spending to last. This is one of the most important pieces, I think, that we stumbled across, is this difference between the willingness to spend to last, to do things that are right from the start, and then the spend to fix. And if those two columns on a ledger could ever be looked at with somebody with some accounting background, I think we would have some very, very interesting stories to tell. And so what we want to avoid are the structures that result in perverse outcomes. And this is, we all have examples of this. We have all seen where a decision we've made has resulted in energy waste, a disruption, a surprise, having to react, solving only one problem and creating new problems later, blame, isolation, all of these things that don't make energy savings easy and better for people, don't make the conditions within the buildings better for people, and they both exist. These things can be observed by the practice of observation, and of course dialogue as well. So I just wanted to leave that with you as to a little bit of a marker of what you're looking for if you actually do start to go on this journey. So I'm going to leave you with a few, next slide please, a few of the things that we discovered. And I have a bunch of slides here with some of the data summarized around our program, and this is what we came to in doing this work with our guys over a couple years in Charlotte. So some of them are unique to the circumstances in Charlotte, and some of them are quite universal. So I'll just leave these here with you to think about and see if they have any connection to some of the things that you've been doing in your own work. But in general, people have poor perceptions of their energy habits. People don't know that they are or are not using a lot of energy. And it's very mysterious, which came back to our number one intervention, which was to make data visible, so people could at least have a feedback to gauge if their action was having an impact on the energy usage. There is a willingness to fix problems that is much stronger than a willingness to get it right from the start. And this is something that came up over and over. And this is very touchy. This is a very difficult problem to intervene on because of the siloed nature of decision making. So how do we get it less so? How do we get this to be maybe not perfect, but less like this? And then finally, then one of the other ones was the skills to run complex buildings. And we know that our hospital and healthcare institutions are complex to start, and they're getting even more complex as the minutes progress, are not valued highly enough. So the people tasked with running the buildings don't always have the skills that are required to run them effectively. And that is because we're not hiring for those skills, that those skills aren't seen as valuable skills. There's reasons there that we could unpack further, but this is damaging to the future of building operations. We have a high tolerance for short-term solutions. If it works now, good. We'll come back to it. There we go, back to that willingness to fix. We'll come back to it later if it breaks again. And why do we do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. One of them is that we don't have a lot of we don't put in a lot of effort to learn from our experiences. That's the last bullet on this slide, that those two are quite related. We found that very few people know they have permission to save energy and fear getting in trouble if they make a change. So where is the risk being absorbed within our energy management decision making? It shouldn't be falling onto the frontline mechanics, which is often where it does fall. And so how do we neutralize that a little bit better and give people the permission to try? And then finally, we did absolutely see that every single person in our energy ecosystem cared about the work they were doing, and they cared about the energy management. What they were able to do about it was something quite different, but they did see themselves as caring. And then the next slide, I'm going to give you a few of the proposed remedies that I think are things that we could start with. Creating jobs with the 21st century problem-solving skill set. Energy expertise is really an emerging expertise for our mechanics and our building operators. And the characteristic that is most important that I found in my work is this interest in problem solving, sleuthing out answers, because generally speaking, there's no textbook that we can go to. We have to kind of pull the pieces together and try them out in that experimental mindset. I think that we need to be better at solving for multiple outcomes simultaneously. Solving one thing at a time. Number one, I don't think that we have the time for that anymore, especially when we're looking at our fossil fuel dependence and the climate crisis that we have around us. But also, it's a waste of labor. We could be doing more with our staff than just doing one thing at a time. So the example, of course, is solving for energy efficiency and indoor air quality simultaneously. Including multiple perspectives in research and decision making. So this is bringing the unusual suspects together. Nurses as part of our evaluation was one of the things that was a feature of our program. So Ed talked about this a little bit, about how the senior leaders are starting to get more and more involved, and even we're seeing some of the surgeons and physicians and clinical staff really starting to take a stand around energy efficiency and climate change. And the reality is that a lot of the work that our senior leaders need to do is very minimal. They really just need to publicly declare that this is important. And they pretty much can have their teams do the work. And so it's not really a big lift for senior leaders to do something like this. And having that perspective makes a difference, because you don't really need to convince your senior leaders to do too much. You just need to convince them to do something public. Giving permission to all staff to solve energy efficiency challenges would go a long way. Just having everybody, supervisor, manager, director, whatever level, just sort of say, yeah, this is what we're doing, and if you have an idea, let us know and let us try it, without anybody fearing that they'll get in trouble. I do believe we need to extend our observation timelines, because when we're looking at people and we're looking at change within social systems and social organizations, those impacts don't necessarily show up right away. We all love the light bulb example, because one day you have an inefficient light bulb, you put in the new light bulb, and the next day it's efficient, and the model works out beautifully. You have day 1 and day 2, and you can just compare it, and you're good, and you're done. That doesn't happen with people. You can provide the training in March, and you may not have an impact until July. So if you're only looking for the month of March, you may say, oh, my training was a waste because nobody did anything. Then all of a sudden in July, you have a huge project hit the road because of the training that you provided, but you're not looking for that impact anymore, and so you miss it. So we do need to be careful about our timelines for when we're going to track our results. And finally, a very difficult one to do, but we can do it slowly but surely: embrace new ways of knowing. There are multiple truths around organizational development. There are multiple truths around energy management, and they do count, even if they have been discounted in the past. And so that's one thing that I would really encourage people to start thinking about. Next slide, please. So if we get this right, we actually embed energy savings more deeply into the fabric of the organization. We have increased savings. We can retain savings over the long term. We expose new or tap into the savings potential. We make energy personal with stories, so people start to care more deeply, and reduce our building scale complications. This is all the more important as we prepare for our future, that is going to include machine learning, automation, net zero buildings, distributed energy resources, renewables. All of these things are emerging, and they do impact how we run our buildings. And if our building mechanics and operators are not included in some of this work, we will fail to capitalize on what is changing around us, and we may even put ourselves into jeopardy. So very important to start thinking about this in a different way. Next slide, please. It's not easy, but you do have to start somewhere. You can see that people will find workarounds. People will find ways to do things to get the conditions they want. So this was a conference room that I was in where somebody had attached a cup of ice to try to heat up the room. And I don't think any designer, any operator wants that to happen, right? We need to be looking at these things from the perspective of the people that are involved in the design and the use, so that we get it right. And then you can read through this on your own, and we'll just go to the next slide, please. And that is my discussion. So think about your workplace. Is there an energy related process or technical change not performing as you would have hoped over the long term? And I think there's two little animations on there, Stephen.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Is there questions for Katie?
While
Yeah,
we're
this is
waiting,
Brent.
go ahead,
I was
Brent.
just wondering on your first slide where you were showing the energy savings for each facility. The very first one showed an energy increase. I was just curious to if you can explain that.
I do not have an explanation for that. It was quite a large hospital, and in the 2017 numbers actually looked good, but in 2018 something happened, and we don't know what was going on with that hospital to be able to explain why the usage went up.
Kate,
Okay,
one of the-
I was thinking it might have been that there was a lot of complaints and maybe they're having trouble with the facility, and after you guys went in that they had resolved a bunch of the issues, but it drove comfort up, but also energy.
So Katie, I think this, Brent, kind of brings into play or brings into view one of the challenges. Some of those other buildings are smaller buildings, I think, Katie, are they not, than the acute care hospital? And
Yeah.
and so in trying to use option C, and I would do the same thing on a facility that large, you've always got other things that are coming into play as well. And that's where being able to build a solid baseline model, I think the approach is right, but there was likely some other obscuring factor that just wasn't apparent at the time. But I bet your savings are in there. It's just that they're buried by something else too. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank
Actually,
you.
Katie, one thing I wanted to reinforce that you said a few times throughout this session, but one of them, I think there was one slide you talked about experimentation when you talked about, I know it was slide 12. I just want to, like, from my point of view, and I've done a lot of reading on organizational continual improvement, and even in manufacturing. And the scientific method is at the heart of a number of companies that do this very successfully, experimentation. And you start with a hypothesis, which actually starts from maybe some very imprecise observations, right? And then you design an experiment to take it forward. So what you've talked about here, I think, is very consistent with a lot of other methods that are used. And that idea of experimentation and permission to experiment, permission to do something, but permission to experiment as well, I think is incredibly valuable. I'm going to jump you back to your last slide now, 19.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Oh, hi, JJ. Hi, Katie. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about earlier you said that it's very important to have a site-based energy champion and also a corporate energy manager. So in terms of having an energy champion in each of the larger sites, for example, how do you see that can be executed? Because it's not easy to find or to even hire a full-time employee just to like have an energy manager embedded in each building. So what were you what can you suggest to us to help, I guess, build capacity for for the site people there?
So what we did was we looked for individuals within the facilities teams. So these were not people that were energy people. They were facilities and maintenance people. And my criteria for energy champion was willingness. My advice about recruiting champions and anything to do with sustainability is to look for the people that want to do it. And you can give them the knowledge around the energy or the subject matter over time, but you cannot build somebody's character to be a champion. To be a champion, you have to want to help your peers. You have to want to learn. You have to want to be part of a team. Those are the, and we did actually a huge study on what it would take to be an energy champion. And I could send you the outcomes of that. But what it came down to was, even if we had somebody with the most technical skill and the best experience with energy management, but they were grumpy, we were like, no, thank you. We needed people that had the characteristics of being a teacher and learner first, and then the energy management skills, we were able to bring them along. Now, often we found that they had both. There's often people that have the willingness to be a champion and want to play around with the energy stuff and understand the energy stuff, and you can get both. But if you have to choose, choose the person that has the characteristics of an expert and learner within them already, because that's much harder to teach.
Well said. Thank you so much. Yeah, and yes, I would be interested in that results where you did for the energy champions, the characteristics.
On the next slide,
Right.
even I have my email address, so you can email me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions for Katie?
So Katie, you had that question on the previous slide about think about your workplace, and then is there an energy related process that's not working as you would hope over the long term? Maybe you'd like to have a dialogue with people about this. So maybe they could say, yeah, I've got one, and they could email you that, and you could maybe have a little bit of dialogue with them. Would that be, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here.
Sure. If people want to talk about any of this, any piece of this, do feel free to reach out to me. This is very interesting work, and there are not a lot of people that talk about it this way. And so, if we can find each other, then great.
Now, Katie, I have a question. Your email address and your Twitter handle, they use C spelled differently. Is that correct? Or is that a typo?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to keep everybody on
their toes? Okay, yeah. I've used one, but I haven't used the Twitter one yet. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Katie. I think
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and everything you've done, you've been exceptional, and I just want to say, please continue your good work. All right, folks, that takes us to the end of Energy Light. If anybody has any more questions or comments, please feel free. It's been a bit of a journey, and I just want to thank everyone for taking part in the program, and I sincerely hope that everyone enjoyed themselves. This has been the first time for the Energy Light course to be run, and I just want you to know that you've been a first class. And I hope that the coalition can create a community of practice from this group. If you have interest in that, please, by all means, email me, email Kent Waddington, and just let us know that you do have an interest, and we can start to look at ways to organize the group. Maybe do monthly or bi-monthly calls and just talk about energy projects and energy-related work. And as I say, what's working, what isn't working. I'd like to thank the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare and the ISO for their part in making this course a reality. And I'd also like to give special thanks to our key sponsor, Train, for helping to plant the seed of this course and see it through to fruition. Their support has been priceless, and I just thought we'd be remiss if we didn't thank them again. And thanks to our subject matter experts. I hope everybody enjoyed that along the way, hearing from all the different people and their expertise. We had Paul Weingartner, ECNG, the folks at Shift Energy. We had Energy Network Services regarding lighting, Train for chillers and HVAC. Paul Ingham spoke to us on from Thermogenics on boilers. We had Armstrong Fluid Technologies, Dino from Energy, Dave McCauley regarding building envelopes, Kevin Bork on RETScreen, Isabel Guimont on Energy Star, Ecosystem on their CHU project, Ed Rubenstein on sustainability and resiliency, and last but not least, certainly not least, we had Katie Cowan on behavior change. And I hope you agree with me when I say that that was an all-star lineup. Much appreciated. And I'd also like to thank a couple of folks who were behind the scenes communications logistics folks. We had Kent Waddington and Dan Ritchie. Thank you very much. We couldn't have done this without you. And to our key instructors, Stephen Dixon and Michelle Perron, hats off for a job well done. I'm sure Stephen and Michelle, if the class was together in a room right now, the applause would be deafening. And to all of you who participated, I think that Kent has some certificates in the works, so look forward to seeing those. We'll definitely hook you up with recordings of the sessions through Link. And regardless of what sector you're working in, stay safe and keep up the good fight against this COVID virus. It's your dedication and hard work that is keeping the occupants in your building safe thus far. And I'm sure your contributions are not being unnoticed. So with that, I'll say I wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving weekend. Enjoy, and bye for now.
And a big hand to you, JJ. You're the best.
Yeah, thank you, JJ. It was an honor to work with you and the whole team. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And
the RETScreen keys are on the way.
Yes. Yes, that's right, too. Good reminder, Stephen. Thank you.
Not wrong, but.
Thank you, guys. Have a good
right.
long weekend.
Yeah, you too. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So JJ, are you going to join us for the RETScreen Connect coming up?
Oh, when is that?
Not RETScreen Connect, sorry. There's another event, I think.
Oh, CIET Connect.
Yeah.
Yeah. When does that happen?
I think it's at 5:30.
5:30?
Yeah,
Probably
so.
not.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry to say.
Where is that? Maybe I'm on the wrong day. I don't seem to have it here. Oh, maybe I got my wrong calendar up. No.
Good job, Stephen.
Thank you. Yeah, I think everything went good. The platform worked well.
Yeah. And I think it was entertaining for everybody to hear from the subject matter experts too. So.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed Katie's presentation at the end there, and it's for the reason I said. I mean, I've always been a great fan of the behavioral side of it, but yeah. And Katie just has a real neat way to present it. Whereas with Ed's, I really, like I said after a session, I mean, I've always thought, I mean, working in a hospital, do the technical things, but is this as important as what's going on in that OR or that patient room? And it turns out that yes, it is. So I'm just going to go on this quick call here. I've got a call here. Okay. So.
Yeah, I'm going to head off. Okay. Bye for now.
I'm just going to go ahead and shut the platform down now. Okay, JJ? Okay.